You brought up the COVID pandemic, and I prefer not to talk about that because people get very heated either way. But what you pointed out is absolutely true. That that the inconsistency of information really people caught on to that, and they're like, "Well, I can't trust this." And for the most part, Americans don't trust big pharma, and for good reason. So it really made the pandemic worse that there was that inconsistency of information.
Happy Friday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the weekly Bustle with Ahad. Today, I am joined by Russ Farnsworth, all the way from the United States. I will let Russ introduce himself. All I know about Russ is that he is an expert when it comes to democracy, when it comes to voter turnout, when it comes to debating about politics. So, what I am interested in here is to hear from Russ what he has to say about the election year that's going on so far, how we can increase voter turnout, and how can we make people empower people to become better citizens. So, before you even get into that, Russ, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to the discussion here.
I am very excited. Just usually I begin like this because now the tables have turned. Usually in my podcast, I always talk to people from the States, from the East Coast, well, mostly from the West Coast, and people also from more warmer parts of the world. And I always get jealous, partly jealous because it's usually very, very cold here in the Netherlands. But now the tables have turned. It's very warm here in the Netherlands, and I'm not happy. So that's my way of also asking other people that are you also happy or not? So Russ, where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from near San Francisco in California.
So it must be hot.
Not too bad. We're on the bay, so it keeps a bit cooler there being so close to the ocean.
That is true. I was recently in south of France. It was the same temperature as it is here in my city right now in the Netherlands, and I was enjoying the breeze there. And here I am dying. It's so warm, and it's just 30 degrees centigrade. It's not that hot. I'm from Pakistan. Right now in Pakistan, it's 42 degrees
Yeah.
centigrade. My friends are melting, and I'm like, I'm also melting. And then they're judging me for it. They're like, my God, can you shut up? And I'm like, sorry, but we don't have air conditioners here. So it becomes life becomes difficult. But great to hear that you are joining us from San Francisco. Russ, tell me a little bit more about yourself so the people who are hearing this get to know you a little bit. And of course, then we dive straight into the topic about what's happening this year. What are your thoughts on it?
Sure. Well, career-wise, I worked in tech, but I've always been very involved in politics and interested in politics. I and actually, I always say that I'm not really interested in politics. That my actual interest is in revolution because that's what we actually need. But politics affects our ability to have a revolution, and and it also informs us of our need to have a revolution. And so I'm very deep within that political world to try to find out exactly what's going on, understand it, to be able to convey to other people that really some type of a revolution is the only way forward. And I do have an interesting take on how we can achieve that bloodless revolution in today's. So if you have interest in that later, we can go on to that topic as well. But yeah, since I was a small kid, probably about 8 years old, I watched the news with my parents all the time and was very interested in learning about politics and hearing everything that was going on in the country and the world.
How has the world changed since then? Actually, I'm quite curious.
Hmm.
Since you were a kid, 8 years old, looking at the news, while now middle-aged, looking at the news, how do you feel?
I guess it's hard to say how much the world has changed. Just getting a bit of a glimpse of it, but for sure, the United States has changed quite a bit, and the news media is probably the biggest example of that. Um, Things that people consider news today wouldn't be considered news tomorrow. I hear people talk about this person is a journalist or that person is a journalist, and they're not. They're television personalities, and they're not doing real news. They're doing spin and they're promoting propaganda for the most part.
I 100% agree with you. I think social media, as much as it has democratized information and democratize voice, it has also brought a lot of problems with it. Now anyone can hold a microphone, anyone can build a following, and in an environment where inflammation and edgy content gets you traction,
Right.
you're incentivized to create edgy content. You don't even want to create edgy content. You're incentivized to create edgy content because you're like, this is what sells. When I'm doing these podcasts, my whole focus with these podcasts is always making nuanced conversations. So my team, my marketing team always tells me, okay, how can you put a spin on it to make it more edgy, more clickbaity? And I'm like, it doesn't need to be clickbaity. It is supposed to be nuanced. I cannot condense this into 1 minute reels. They're like, yeah, but we need to, and we will do it. So even our conversation will have 1 minute snippets because they're like, we need to do this. You need to play the game if you want to get there. And I'm like, yeah, but I need people to listen to this 45-minute, 1 hour long conversation, understand the nuances between me and Russ. And they're like, they will. But first, they need to be hooked into it. So we need to listen to Russ say something crazy for like 1 minute, and then we make people come there. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. And it's a struggle, Russ. It's always a struggle. I want to get deeper into that. But before that, I heard something that really intrigued me. You worked in tech. I
Yes.
also work in tech, so I'm quite curious to what have you done in tech so far?
Uh, I started out at the very bottom with help desk. You're probably familiar with that is for your audience. If they're not, it's kind of the person that sits in a call center and answers the phone when people have problems. I only did that for a couple of months and then went up to second level support and did that for a couple of years. And it seemed like the way for me to move beyond that was either to go into networking or to go into training. And so I chose training. I tend to have a good way of communicating with people, and I'm able to, make things that are technical understandable for people who maybe struggle with tech. And so that seemed to be a really good role for me. And so I did that for about 15 or more years in LA.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. So you were training tech mostly. So what kind of tech stack were you training?
It's it was in law firms, so your basic Microsoft Office stuff, Word and
Okay.
Excel and that, PowerPoint. And then there's in law firms, there are some legal specific applications like doing time entry. Every time an attorney spends time on the phone or reads a document, they have to kind of make an entry of that for the client. So there are legal specific applications as well that I had to get to learn and then be able to train other people on those apps.
Oh, that sounds quite exciting because I also, well, my day job is a data consultant. So I build and support building data products for organizations. But next to it, I also like training organizations to become more data driven. So I also teach mostly the AI and data thinking aspect of technology, but also sometimes tooling such as Power BI, such as Excel, to get people to become more analytical, which I think is very, very important. And this could be also a good segue into our next topic, which I also think is very important for people to become empowered and to become adept in consuming the information that they're consuming online. And that's why I also, like you, started in tech, but then got interested in society and politics because I saw this really easy bridge in my head that look, data and the technology that I'm working with requires critical thinking. And here in this day and age, we do require critical thinking in other aspects of our lives as well, right?
Right.
Specifically, media literacy, specifically information literacy. When you have people spewing information every here and there, you need to be able to digest it. You need to know what is skeptical, what is to be skeptical of, and what is to be not skeptical of. And that is the struggle that I'm facing these days. I listen to people on Twitter talking about. I'll give you a very good example. I don't know your political leaning, so it'll be really nice to also see the initial reaction of yours when I say this comment. But there was this lady who said, "Okay, I'm going to be voting for Trump because I want to feel safe again." Right?
Yeah.
And I said, as a lady, you want Trump in the office to feel safe again, who represents a party who is willing to take away your bodily autonomy. Make that make sense to me,
Right.
right? Make that make sense to me. And that's the struggle that I'm having. So over to you. What are your thoughts on this? How can we empower our society to become more critical in their thinking? How do we consume the media around us? And how do we make better decisions from it?
Yeah, it's difficult, but it's an incredibly important piece of the whole component that we're discussing here, as far as getting people interested in politics, feeling like there's something there for them to benefit from if they actually do spend the time informed and then go out to the polls and actually cast a vote. Um, right now, a lot of people don't feel like it really matters that much. So that's something that we definitely need to address. And the woman that you mentioned, I had a comment about that. Well, I think that what she kind of is an example of, and what I think often happens is, I mean, she's trying to shove a square peg in a round hole, and it's not working. And the problem is that Joe Biden is that square peg too. He doesn't fit what everybody needs. He's too old. He's kind of feeble. He's been in politics forever and not really been a good actor there, as far as I'm concerned. So when people have these interests and the things that they care about politically, and they're trying to grab a politician that's going to match it, good luck. Good luck. You might have a politician that says what you feel on a certain number of issues, but they're doing their own thing. And no, I don't believe any politician in Washington really has um, the interest of the American people at heart with most of what they're doing.
I I would like to add something there, and I completely agree with you. I think when you said people try to latch onto or people try to choose politicians based on what resonates with them, right? So their beliefs are being echoed by this politician. I feel like that is the wrong way to look at politics. That's the wrong way to look at democracy. Because if you have a certain value system, you don't want someone who embodies that value system. You want someone who helps you execute that value system. So that person needs to be out of the equation because, as you said, that person might echo your value system, but their value system might encompass more things that you don't agree of. And just because you follow them now, because you're like, that person is, I'm resonating with that person, they might make you do other stuff, or they might pass policies that they would want your backing on, which you might not agree with. But now you have to follow through because you're like, no, that's my guy. And that doesn't make sense. It's not athleticism or celebrities that you need to follow the person through and through. It's politics. At the end, the policy matters more than the person. So you need to judge the person on their policies. And what I'm struggling with right now with the whole Biden and Trump debate all the time is people are not talking about policies online. They're
Right.
not talking about anything online. They're only talking about, look, old senile guy, Hunter Biden, Trump, convicted felon. They're just attacking each other's characters. I have yet to see someone talk about the policies that they've executed, the policies that they want to execute. No, no, no conversation about that. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you're absolutely right about that we need to focus more on policy, and we're not really doing that. Um, you mentioned that that we're gonna have to do a little edit here. Oh, well, we got noise in the background anyway.
Yeah, yeah, but that's don't worry about that. Yeah, will keep going. So yes, yeah, you were
Uh,
telling me about.
yeah, there I was going to mention something about what you had just said. Oh, okay. Yeah, so when someone like a politician says something that really resonates with you, a lot of times they're doing that strategically. They know what's going to press your buttons and get you interested in that candidate. But that doesn't mean they're going to follow through. I mean, Trump had a few ideas that I thought were really good, but once he was elected, he never talked about them again, and they never got implemented, or even he never even tried. So and politicians do that all the time. They'll make crazy campaign promises, and they don't have any real intention of following up with those and seeing them through. It's just kind of a bait and switch tactic. So definitely that getting triggered by something that a politician says and then wanting to invest politically in that politician is definitely a bad approach.
What I really like about what you said right now was that the bait and switch. You have politicians making campaign promises but not following up on it. In a country like Pakistan, where I'm from, they do that a lot, right? But in Pakistan, we justify it. We say, well, more than 60% of your population is not educated. So it makes complete sense that they do the bait and switch because they don't expect the people to know for next 5 years or to hold these people accountable. But when I look at the US, when I look at Europe, educated people in educated countries also don't have the long-term sense of what you should expect from a democratic government. And I think that is one of the biggest flaws of democracy. This 4 year cycle, 5 year cycle is okay. You have this 4 or 5 year cycle because you want not one person to be in power for too long. That's great. But how are you judging them after those 4 or 5 years? Because it's so long. And you see that in the last year, they start doing a lot of those policies that they promised you in the start because election year is coming. Biden just approved some immigration act in trying to get more people legally be able to stay in the US, and that was one of his promises to make DACA easy and everything. But the other side is now arguing, oh look, he's getting more illegal voters, and his people are like, look, he's finally doing what he wants to do. In the reality, it is all theater. He could have done that 4 years ago,
Yeah.
but he didn't want to because he was like, it's not important. But now he's like, no, I'm going to save these bullets for the last so that people re-elect me, and then I'm not going to do it again, do anything for 4 years. I'm going to do it at the end. And I think that is the flaw of democracy. People don't remember this. When I try to argue with people, I don't go like, think about the economy, think about this, think about that. I go like very simply, Trump and Biden. Can you go and check the promises they made and how many promises they broke?
Right.
And Trump wins that by a far margin, right? So then you argue that, okay, is this the metric that I'm using to judge my candidate? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. That people tend to latch on to whatever the candidate says, and then because they said that thing that they like, they ignore what the candidate does, and they support them anyway. And so, yeah, it's really not a good situation. Um, and people, I think, at least in the United States, we here need to be more interested in an agenda that supports or um, reacts to our interests, the interests of everyday citizens rather than these politicians. Right now, most people are fighting for one side or the other, and they're so invested in getting their politician in or making sure that their party wins big in an election, and that's not really doing anything for we the people. It's just kind of continuing the status quo, which is, in my view, not really a workable situation in the long run.
I understand what you mean. It's like it should be bottom up, but it's top bottom, right? It should
Yeah,
be you in neighborhood making your changes and policies helping you there, and that reflects the government that is on top. But no, it's the other way around. You want a government on top, and you don't really care about the policies that come to you on a state level. It's like, oh, let me just get my candidate in. So you have some ideas on how to improve people's literacy, how to make them better citizens, and of course that in turn leads to better voting. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
sure. I would say that the first thing is making sure that everybody has good information. And there was a while, I think I was about 19 years old. I was just so frustrated with the news that I stopped listening or watching at all. I just tuned out. And it was that way for probably 2 or 3 years. And then I ended up discovering National Public Radio, which is funded by the US government or partially funded by the US government. It's also funded by the listeners of each radio station. So
Yeah.
those are the two primary money sources, but the big corporations are not really funding public radio in the same way
Mhm.
that they're funding the average mainstream media news. And
Mhm.
so just taking that dirty money out of the equation, or most of the dirty money out of the equation, really improves the quality of the news that you get. And you can go beyond the public radio and public TV, and there are actually news networks that are completely funded by viewers and listeners, and don't have any corporate money in, and some of them don't take any government money either. So then it really gets to be independent. And I think that's where you're going to find the best information, when people aren't trying to make a news report that's going to please a politician or please a corporation. Then they're going to give you what's real, the real deal. You're going to get the actual truth.
I really like that idea. I also have some opinions on that, but before I get there, I would like to push back a little bit, if you allow me, because I completely agree with the point of having no market money in the government. Oh, I mean in the news, but having a listener-only funded radio, don't you think that can also spiral into an echo chamber of sort? That okay, the people are paying us money to give them content, news, and we know what that base is like now. So if we make the news that they like to see, they will keep funding us
Right. No,
instead
that
of if instead of giving them the truth.
right. No, that's definitely an issue too. And I think that was I think that Alex Jones is kind of an example of that. If you're familiar with him, he's kind of a right wing um, provocateur type of news person or broadcaster.
Mm.
Um, and he got in big trouble over telling a lot of lies about this Sandy Hook shooting, where a bunch of small kids got
I
killed.
remember. I
Yeah,
remember. Yeah.
and I haven't thoroughly researched the whole thing, but I did look into some of it. And what it appears to have been going on is that the more he talked about this and said it was a big cover up and it was all fake, he just started getting more and more interest and more better ratings. And so he kept talking about Sandy Hook over and over and just kept prolonging it. And then at the same time, he was running advertisements for his own vitamins that he was trying to put out. So you could really see how the money interest was it seemed to be driving the news. And
Yeah.
so yeah,
Eh,
you're definitely right about that. But there again, that it was his own corporation that was involved in kind of the money aspect of it. So again, if you can get the whole commercial aspect out of the news, you're definitely going to be better off.
I that aspect of it I completely agree with. And the idea that I had, if I would like to share that, is that the government needs to completely fund your media. There should be no such thing as a free press, a market press. But then the problem is, oh, then Ahad, what do you mean? Will the government control the media? I'm like, no, because you control the media. The government is basically your tax money. So if the taxpayers' money pays for the media, then you have to make sure that that media knows their responsibilities to the people, not the government in charge, because the government in charge is not paying their salaries. The taxpayers are paying their salaries, and that has to be reiterated again and again through transparency and accountability. If they will have to be transparent about their sources, transparent about their news coverage, transparent about which projects they go for, everything. And because you and I both work in tech, we know the value technology can bring in these things. All of this sounds a lot of admin and a lot of paperwork. That's why people are not interested. They're like, oh, it's going to be so much effort to put these projects out every time, press releases. No, it's going to be very easy to update an app now. Now it's very easy that every citizen has an app in which they can check the government budget on a click of a button. They can check where the money is going on a click of a button. As long as you have your systems in place, every dollar can be accounted for. But governments don't want that. And that extra builds distrust in the government because they try to withhold information. And my argument is if you don't withhold information, if you're very transparent, the people will trust you more, even if you make a bad decision. COVID is a very good example of it, right?
Right.
You have half people who go like, "Oh, that was a good strategy." Half people go like it was a hoax. Why? Because the government was not transparent enough. Fauci said one thing, and the next day he said something else, and the next thing he said something else, and people were getting mad that he's changing his stance. In reality, that's science.
Right.
We're figuring out as we go. But they were not transparent about that. That hey, look, we are figuring out as we go. Let's figure it out. No, they were constantly saying stuff like, "This is the thing now. No, no, this is the thing now. No, this is the thing now." And they completely forego the transparency of the decision making process, and that develops a distrust, in my opinion. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's definitely true. And you brought up the COVID pandemic, and I prefer not to talk about that because people get very heated either way. But what you pointed out is absolutely true. That that the inconsistency of information really, people caught on to that, and they're like, well, I can't trust this. And for the most part, Americans don't trust big pharma, and for good reason. So it really made the pandemic worse that there was that inconsistency of information, and it bred more mistrust and distrust. And so yeah, that's a big problem. And all these people have their past too. Fauci has a pretty long past that people know about, and they know things that he's done in the past. And so having him be the face of the pandemic was another way of creating more distrust in that situation. I think
it's
they should
it's
have gotten a
it's
better spokesperson.
and I think that's part of the problem because we have our internal biases that we don't take account for, right?
Um,
So not trusting Fauci because of his history, not trusting the flippy floppy nature of the information that came in, not understanding how science works, that this is how you run with it, that you learn something, you grow, you understand, you reject a hypothesis, you learn and you grow. A lot of people don't understand that scientific method, right? Because they have been not taught that scientific method. They're not explained that scientific method. And that is why people like Trump, people like those far right leaders in the world, they gain power is because people prefer simplicity and they give you such simple answers. They give you such easy answers. I'll make a wall, push them all on the other side, right? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to make life simple for you. And to be honest, I was in favor of that kind of mentality because I was always like, yeah, but I am supposed to be a citizen. I'm supposed to be a father. I'm supposed to be a partner. I'm supposed to be a son. I'm supposed to be an employee. I'm supposed to be an employer. I'm supposed to be a provider. I cannot wear all of these hats. So if this person is willing to take my hat from me,
right.
all more power to him or her, right? And I think that was part of the problem that I faced, and I feel like most people face now, is they need to understand that being a citizen is as important as being an employee, as important as being a father or a family person. It's as
Absolutely.
important because you're living in a society and you need to give back to society. So this takes me into the next point that I want to discuss with you because this is something you told me you had ideas about. How do we incentivize people to become better citizens? Because at the end of the day, you don't work because you want to work. You work because you get paid, right? If you give anyone an option, most probably people will be like, if I get paid to sit at home and do the stuff that I want to do, I most probably will not work. So the same can go for voting. Same can go for being involved in the public sphere, doing more for your neighborhood, doing everything. Right now, we just rely on good vibes and respect and all of those things. But for a lot of people in individualistic society, that's not enough anymore. They're like, I don't care if people know me by a good name. I am my own person. I can live in my own house. So I don't need to be with people. So you had some ideas and thoughts about how to incentivize people more to become better citizens and go vote more and be more involved in the public sphere. So I want to hear about that.
Sure. And I think that the news and information aspect is has to be there first, that you have to have good news sources available to people so that they can be well informed. If you
Yeah,
incentivize without that first, then you're going to have more problems because you're going to have really uninformed or misinformed people voting.
definitely.
But I know that some countries have mandatory elections. You're required to vote, and in the U.S., I don't think that could ever fly, and I don't really support that either. But we could incentivize people just by saying, look, if you vote, you get a $25 tax credit, so at the end of the year, at least they get a little bit of something back. And then also we could put each person, if they voted, into a lottery, and maybe they win a larger amount, that maybe they win $100,000, and that would really incentivize people to want to vote. I do think that a lot of people maybe intend to vote, but then they just don't follow through. So something like that would make sure that they stop what they're doing, take the time to do something that is important, and hopefully it'll benefit everybody in the country. There's an anecdote that I like to tell about when they used to have people guess the weight of a bull at like a county fair.
Yeah.
and they would bring out this giant bull, and some people would look at it and say, wow, that bull is enormous, it must weigh at least 300 pounds. And then someone else would look
Yeah.
at it and say, wow, that bull is enormous, it must weigh 16,000 pounds. And you'd have these
Yeah.
wildly inaccurate estimations of the weight of this bull. But if you had 1,000 people that would come in and all guess the weight, they would end up guessing the weight within 1 pound of the bull's actual weight. And I think that's an interesting story to tell in regards to politics, because it means that the more people we have out there doing it, the more we're going to hit the target. And if you have half the country, like we do in the United States, that just doesn't vote and doesn't put their input into it, then it makes it more and more difficult to reach right decisions.
I love that anecdote. I hear about that anecdote so much that it's about the wisdom of the crowd and the group think. And I think, to be fair, before moving to Europe, that's how I thought about the Western world. Because in Pakistan, groupthink cannot work. 60% of people are not educated. If I do groupthink, if I do wisdom of the crowd, they're going to make stupid decisions. Nothing to them. I don't blame them. They're not educated. They cannot think 5 years ahead when their food source for the next 1 year is under question. There's food insecurity, there's poverty, these people want to survive. And that's why in countries like Pakistan, if you go to vote, near the polling stations, you have people from their respective parties holding 5 kg of rice in their hand. And they're like, if you vote for our party, we're going to give you 5 kg of rice. Now imagine who gets the vote.
Right.
Those people get the vote because they have a system that they're trying to incentivize. In countries which are more educated, I expect better incentives because I expect them to be more educated. And I agree with you. In a country like the US, in countries like Europe, I would expect this to be the case that, hey, look, if we all just vote, we will almost always come to the right conclusion. But the more I see what's happening around the world, the more I'm getting skeptical about it. That, okay, I don't see you guys making the right decision. And there we go back full circle to what you said about the first point about media, because now it's not about the people at top controlling the people at bottom through sheer force of or like fear or oppression that, hey, do what I say and I'm gonna kill you. Now it's more of a subtle thing that, hey, look, you are free to do what you do, but all the information that you're consuming is coming from very few sources.
Right.
And through that, we are distorting your opinion and you're still doing what you want. I still think that's still better if we can hit 100% voter participation rate. And then we start talking about education and everything. But if 60%, 70% people show up, 30, 40% don't even show up, then you don't even know if you're making the right decision yet. Maybe if 100% people show up, maybe they will do, as you said, and make good groupthink decisions, even though there is bad media everywhere. Because now, on average, there's research and there are polls that are saying that people are getting more and more skeptical of media than before. That's a good sign. You
Yeah.
need to be skeptical of everything, right?
Yeah.
You need to be skeptical of everything. But with skepticism, sometimes people take it too far. Then you have conspiracy theories, you have all of the stupid stuff that comes with it. So there's a line that needs to be drawn between healthy skepticism and media literacy versus pseudo intellectualism, right?
Right.
And their education plays a very big role. And I know that you have thoughts about that as well, about how to make the country a bit more educated, how and why is that needed.
Yeah. Just to touch base on a couple of things that you said,
Mm.
um, when we have uh, I'm sorry, I keep losing my train of thought. But it's like
It's
you bring up
perfectly
all
fine.
these interesting topics, and it's like, oh my God, yes. Um, so first of all, I think that you talked about having the government fund media, and we kind of have that in the United States with our public radio. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that it would be wise also to have government funding of a social media app because that has kind of become the public square. And
Yeah.
every time someone gets bounced off of X.com or Facebook, then it's, oh, I've been shut down and I've lost my First Amendment rights. And then everybody says, well, they're a private company. They don't have to give you First Amendment rights on their platform. Uh,
Yeah.
so it would be awesome to have a place where you can say anything and nobody can get deplatformed from it. And it would be a true town square. where everybody can put their ideas out, and hopefully you can raise some consensus towards something that's really positive and take things in that direction. And I think it is a sort of a double-edged sword, that it could very much go the other way. You can have people with crazy ideas all come together and then go off in some crazy direction. But as with the bull analogy, I think that when we get everybody in there and able to give their thoughts, that most people want the country to go. I mean, most people want the country to improve and to do the right thing. And I think if we had a place where we can put all our ideas out there and nobody gets deplatformed, then I think people would be more interested in sharing opinions and learning. And the other thing about that is that on social media, people often amplify the voices of politicians and of news people who already have these huge platforms. And I think that's just ridiculous. Is we should be on social media debunking everything that those people are telling us. And if somebody, a politician is telling a lie, bending the truth, then everybody should be attacking them and correcting the record so that we have the truth out there.
Yeah.
So a change of the social media landscape would be a big deal. That would really help things out a lot. Um, Moving into education, I think that educating kids about politics is super important because we've got them in schools as sort of a captive audience, and we can use that to get them to do things that are going to make them good citizens. And I don't think that anybody could really come up with a good reason why we shouldn't be doing that, as long as it's nonpartisan and everything's factual. And there used to be in this country a lot more civics education than there is currently. And I'm sure you've probably seen some of the videos that are online where someone on the street asks the passerby, who sometimes is a college graduate, about the Civil War, and they don't know who fought it or when it was. And, so we have this real lack of knowledge, and we need to fill that gap with making sure that people understand how our government works and basically how the government works and how we can use it to achieve what we want it to do. And that's kind of absent, I think, in a lot of people, and especially young people today. They're not getting the education that we got back in my day.
I agree. I really, really loved your idea about social media being governmentally funded. I 100% agree that any space where you talk about your own, like your own country policies, there needs to be a separate place where you debate policies, where you and your politicians have a direct access to each other, where the politician can read the comments of what you're saying, not on Twitter, but like proper educated criticism, educated questions, and they have to inform you. They can do like weekly Instagram lives on that app in which they directly take questions from their constituents. Technology can make things so much easier in bridging the information gap. They just don't want to do it, right? They're busy fundraising instead. They're busy networking and getting money for their next round. They're busy for their primaries, not doing a weekly connect with their own people to know if they're banking on their promises or not. And that's the beauty of technology. It can really help you there. So I really, really think you're right on with an idea that a government app should exist in which citizens and residents of that particular region get to debate and discuss in an informed way. But that leads me to the next question about what you said about education. So I do want to ask you this. It's very easy for us to say, let's make everyone educated and let's not make it bipartisan. Let's not make it on partisan lines, and let's talk about facts. But how do you debate, or how would you argue and introduce such legislation when people don't even agree over what is a fact?
Right.
To give you an example, in Pakistan and India have had 3 wars, right? And in both sides of the country, they say they won the war in their history books, right? Now, we were raised saying that we won the war. They were raised saying that they won the war. In reality, probably they won the war, right? But we are not taught that. We are taught we won the war. So that's our history books, printed and everything. So how do you distinguish what is a fact and how do you convince other people that this is a fact? A good example of this would be creationism versus evolution, the biggest heated debate in the US as well as everywhere around the world. How do you know what is a fact then?
Yeah, that's a really tough one because there are people that want to cling to different sets of facts, and what they consider facts may not actually be factual. So I think you have to kind of step back a bit and go back to the point of making making good quality information available to people that they can know where they can trust information. I mean, when I look at any corporate media, these are the the news stations that run commercials, every 15 minutes or whatever it is. I haven't watched corporate news in ages because I just don't trust it. Um, and when you hear you hear news reporting that isn't chasing that those the ratings, and they're not blowing things out of proportion and trying to make everything sound extreme. I think it does register with people that, okay, this really sounds more like the real deal, or at least it did with me. There will be some people that want to hold on to their what they claim are facts, no matter what. So you're not going to be able to beat it out of everybody in the entire country. But if you have those good news sources available, I think when people listen to it, they will understand, and it'll make sense to them how media that isn't geared toward just a lot of ratings actually produces better content and better information for the viewer or the listener. And there was a lot
I
of
think in
things
this,
that I kind of knew
yeah,
about.
continue.
Yes, there was a lot of things that
Yeah.
I kind of knew about or but didn't fully understand until I started listening to media that was sort of nonpartisan and didn't have that corporate media drive of trying to put out propaganda, because everybody
Mhm.
that's wealthy right now wants to keep the situation exactly the same as it is, or maybe improve it a little bit better for them. Um, so they control all this information through these corporate news channels, and they're going to make sure that they keep being rich and that you keep not being rich. That's their whole agenda, is to make sure that they stay rich and you don't. And so whatever information they have to put out there to keep that the case, they're going to do it. But like I say, when people hear real information, it starts to register. Um, and I remember, when I heard NPR, one of the first times that I'd heard it, they did a story on female genital mutilation, which was something I'd never ever heard before. And I listened to this. I think I was in my 20s at the time, and I was like, why is it that the other news doesn't talk about this? And then you realize, well, they don't want people worrying about people in Africa and in the Middle East and worrying about their genitals. They want people going down the street and buying Budweiser and going out to the movies and filling their car with Chevron. They have specific things that they want people to do as a result as a result from hearing the information that they get. So if they talk about things like that, things like female genital mutilation, uh, a lot of people are going to be like, wow, that's kind of an important issue, and maybe I should be sending my money overseas to try to help stop that practice. And that means
Yeah.
that the money doesn't go to Chevron and it doesn't go to Pfizer and where everybody wants it to go, all these oligarchs.
It's it's mind-boggling because you and I also come from maybe a privileged set of people who understand the value information and media plays in society. That we look at this and we just go like, I personally, I can't speak for you, I can speak for myself. I go like, isn't this obvious? Don't you see what's happening around the world? And I don't mean in any way of conspiracy or anything. I'm saying, can you not see that the information that you consume shapes your opinion,
Yeah.
which shapes the information that you consume. And it's a vicious circle of you trying to find the stuff that will validate your belief. Can you not challenge yourself? Can you not look at alternative sources of news and see what's out there? Understand the objective reality as much as you can. And a lot of people don't. A lot of educated people that I know don't. They're like, why do I need to do this? That's the answer I always get. And that's a question I always get, and I don't have an answer to that, Russ. I actually don't. I'm like, to me, it seems natural to know everything as much as I can before I make a decision or understand both sides of the argument so that I know, okay, which side do I fall into? It's not like I don't have biases, but it seems natural to me that this is the right thing. But other people are like, we don't care enough. We just pick one thing and we just let life roll.
Yes.
And I don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah. Laziness is a big problem. And a lot of people who are, that I converse with online who might be completely misinformed about things, will say, well, I did my own research, or you need to go do the research. Um, and what they mean by that is they've just turned on some news channel, or went to some page on the internet and they read what they wanted to see. And then that's what they call confirmation bias, where you already have an
Yes.
idea about something, and you then search for information that confirms that it's true. And then once you get that, you're like, oh, I knew all along. I knew I was right. But it's sort of a mirage, and it's a hard thing for people to realize within themselves, I'm sure, to be able to notice that they have such a bias and that it's affecting their decisions and their judgment. So it's a difficult thing to address. But again, when you go back to having good information that everybody can hear and listen to, I would hope that they would detect the better news quality and move away from a lot of these corporate news channels that are just putting out pure propaganda to serve the oligarchy in this country.
I love the fact that you really are zoned in on one fact because that is the smart thing to do. If you are fighting on a lot of different fronts, your energy dissipates, your message dissipates. And if you just keep sticking to one thing, you're like this. And I love it that in every conversation that we had, and every angle we tried to look at, you were like, I will take this back to the first thing that we did, which is information literacy. People need to take information from the right sources, or else anything else after that is pointless, anyways. And I might feel differently about that, but I do appreciate the fact that you bring it back every single time to that one thing because it is 100% very, very important. And 100% we need to fix the information gap. I personally believe let's fix voter turnout first. If 100% of people start voting first, and then they're voting stupidly, then we start fixing the information problem. But I genuinely believe, because of the amount of educated people that exist in your country, in our countries here in Europe, that if everyone who was supposed to vote votes, then there will be no problem.
Yeah.
The problem is a big chunk of them do not vote or are told not to vote or are, like they're dissuaded through the media that they consume that, oh, it's pointless to vote. It's not, and that really makes it a problem, I think. So that is something I wanted to slowly wind down the conversation on because we're almost hitting an hour. So I want to take this conversation now towards more of the generic things that are going to be happening. Election is coming in November. There's a debate today at the time of recording. When this gets published, we will be near the 4th of July. As an American, I know these things are very important to you guys, right? 4th of July, election year. What are your thoughts on this year? What are your thoughts on the current situation? And what are your hopes that come out of it?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, in 2016, we kind of we found ourselves in a similar situation where most people didn't really like the candidates that were available. Back then, what I was hoping would come out of that election is that third parties would get more support, and that getting that more support would make those third parties better contenders for the two primary parties. So
Yeah.
if we had the Libertarian Party, if they had the same kind of exposure that the Republican Party has, they would be pulling the Republican Party toward more fiscal conservatism. And if the Green Party was elevated to the level that the Democrats are, they would be pulling the Democrats toward more peace and taking care of the American people. So the fact that we're a two-party system in the United States is an issue on its own that really makes our politics different. And if we had more
Mm.
voices or more competitive parties, then they would have to really compete for to get those good ideas out there and try to win those voters over. And right now, when you have two parties and both of them have bad ideas, there's not really any place for anybody to go. And
Yeah.
so that's going to be a tough issue. And in countries where there's more parties, especially when you have a sort of a parliamentary, style of government, where someone can win a share of the vote and then get a share of the power, basically. Um,
Yeah.
that that works better than what we have in the United States, which is whoever gets that one extra vote becomes the ruler and they control everything now. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, I think it would behoove the United States to somehow work out some type of a power sharing strategy for our country, so that rather than winner take all, um, we still have some balance of control over the government that's shared among the people.
I agree. I think there's so much that we can do on this front. Also, as you mentioned about the two-party system and the third parties do not get enough coverage because the two-party systems with their fundraising are also so crazily invested by outside parties
Yeah,
who then bring their agendas to the table when these people get into power. If you have one media system ran through the government, then all parties are only allowed to run campaigns on that channel, on that platform, and that makes even this fundraising problem go away because all the citizens will be active there. So you both will be allotted equal time on that platform. You get to reach your masses. No need for any extra campaigning. No need for any extra anything.
right.
And that really rules away the whole corporate problem as well, right?
Yeah,
It all boils down to how we structure. Because for me, none of us have a problem with taxes. Although that is also a very weird thing if you think about it, that the government will take away 30 to 40% of your income. In certain cases, 50% of your income. In our country, 60% of your income, right? And no one bats an eye.
right.
They don't bat an eye about biasness. They don't bat an eye about where our money is going, corruption. They don't do all of that. But when we talk about the government controlling information as well, what you consume, and not controlling, just organizing, just like they organize your taxes, people have a problem with it. They're like, no, 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 they're not. It's free world. I'm like, yeah, but it's also free world for money. Why am I working 40 hours a week, busting my ass only to get 40% of the paycheck? Why am I giving them the 60% of the paycheck? And then the answer is, well, look, the healthcare you get, the roads that you get, and everything. I'm like, yeah, but I don't know how much money goes in there either. They don't show me the transparency of it either. So now I'm okay with that. I'm supposed to be okay with that. But if I say they can also control the flow of information and not be that transparent about it, then I have a problem. We live in a free world. So that dichotomy, that inconsistency also bothers me. I feel like if you're okay with giving your hard earned money to the government, be okay with giving your hard earned trust to the government because you're electing the government and they should be responsible enough, like they should be responsible enough with your money
Yeah,
to be responsible enough with the information that they're going to provide to you, right?
yeah,
I think that's very, very important. And yeah, it's a struggle to make that happen.
yeah. And kind of the key there is making sure that um, when people are get active and start voting, again, that they've got the right information. And if they are well informed about things and they are active and you have high voter participation, now you really have your hands on the wheel, really, in government. And if the government does something that isn't good, then you can vote people out and you can lift up people who are going to step in and do the right thing. So it all kind of works together as this one interconnected mess of, spider web of strategies and situations. So it's tough, but going through it and talking it out, trying to find solutions, trying to find better ways forward is always going to be, how you do it. And getting information from people on the TV, people on the internet, probably not the best way of really getting a hold of what's important and how we make good changes to and have a better society.
Agreed. I agree 100%. I am very grateful for this conversation, Russ. I
Yeah.
had so much fun. We are closing in to the end. You did not answer my question about 4th of July, so I want to leave that as the final question I give to you. 4th of July is coming up next week. What are your plans? What are you going to be up to? Tell me about
Probably,
that and we close the conversation.
yeah, I'm probably just going to be taking it easy on the 4th of July, not do it up big. Um, I probably will try to get an apple pie somewhere that's big in the United States, and I love pie. Uh, and I do write a blog, and every time there's a 4th of July, that's a good opportunity to put out a blog post and try to promote really grandiose ideas about we the people taking over and really having control over our government. And so that's I think it's a good time to put those out, and I think I'll probably be working on one for 4th of July.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing, that we keep working, we keep hustling, we keep trying to put out nuanced takes, nuanced information, not simple takes, not simple information that just makes it easy for us to consume, but difficult conversations, conversations that will make you think, conversation that might make you uncomfortable, ideas that will be like, I don't know about that. I think that is the step we all need to take. And I'm happy to see, and I'm looking forward to your 4th of July blog to see what ideas you come up with. We will put that in the show notes so that anyone who's listening, who's interested when this comes out, they can read your blog post, they can check it out. And other than that, anything about Russ will be in the show notes as well. So you can follow him wherever you need to follow him. You can follow his journey in trying to make We the People happen. Thank you so much, Russ,
Yeah, and
for your time.
if I can do a
Yeah.
quick overtime, and maybe you might want to
Yeah.
splice this in place
Yeah.
of something else. Um, the few things I did want to mention, first of all, podcasts like yours are super important because, again, you're like the concerned citizen trying to make your country better. And with that being the drive of your podcast, that's really what's important. And these other news sources, if they take a lot of money and they're more interested in ratings and paying people tens of millions of dollars to put on a suit and tie and lie to you, that's not anything that's really benefiting our country. So I really love the fact that all these podcasts are springing up and that everybody's really getting their ideas out there, and there's platforms for people who have new ideas to come on and speak. Uh, Also, I mentioned civics classes, and I think that drilling down into that a little bit, one of the things that I thought about doing was to have these students basically go through an election, and you can take an election that's maybe 20 years old or something, so something before they were born and don't maybe have a lot of knowledge of, and you can just kind of start it over like from the beginning of this class, and you can run ads from the politicians and have the students discuss who they think is telling the truth and who's lying, who's actually going to follow through with their political agenda. And then you could actually, like, within the span of a few months, you could actually get to the end of that political campaign and the term in office. Like, if we're talking about a president, you could come to the end of their term in office and actually look back and say, did they actually fulfill their campaign promises the way people thought that they would, or did they not? And I think that would just really inform people about how this whole machine works in a really good way. And then you could have also students kind of doing their own elections and people coming up with campaign slogans and speeches, and people voting for students and seeing if they follow through with what they say they're going to do, or if they were just pulling your chain the whole time. Um, and then one other thing I wanted to mention about education is just practice, because I remember when I was listening to news as a small child, and I heard somebody say, "Oh, you have to go into the voting booth and pull the lever." And I was like, what kind of machinery is in this voting booth where I've got to pull levers, and with other dials and switches too? And what the heck is going on? So having like a practice or a mock election that allows people to see what a ballot actually looks like, and understand how a voting machine works if they have voting machines. I think that would also give just people more of a sense of like, yeah, I know what I'm doing in there. The information is one component of it, but also just walking into a voting booth and being able to understand what's happening, that's going to make people more confident and more, I think, more interested in actually casting their vote.
Yeah, I loved your ideas, especially your election idea. I think, again, going back to the same thing, people don't look back enough.
Yeah.
They don't look back enough. They don't look back at the stuff like elections and the promises made, the promises kept, the reasons behind it. They don't dive into the details much. And I really love that if you if you groom the next generation of Americans or next generation of students in general anywhere with the history of their past, it really, really would help them become better informed citizens. Yeah, you hear about all the problems. In Germany, they teach you everything about the Holocaust. They teach you everything about everything. And now it's a world where if you say anything against Jews or anything against Israel, then they become very sensitive about it. And I have my other questions about it that, okay, you need to have an open mind, but because that's how they're taught in education, it's very strict one way of a place, then you're not open to it. You need to be open to challenges. You need to be open to skepticism in general, not in this particular case or that particular case. You need to be open in general to looking at the information in the past, challenging it, understanding the whys, keep that cycle going. You can't just take one thing and do it. So with us as well, I think in the US, it's not just that they don't teach you about the Civil War or they don't teach you about the Constitution. They do, but that's it. And then after that, it's gone. Then you don't hear about much of it. And that is the problem. The continuous cycle of history is not taken into account, and it is boring. Politics is supposed to be boring. Democracy is supposed to be boring. All the good things in life are supposed to be boring. That's my personal belief. If it's not boring, then there is some agenda behind it. Right?
Yeah, and maybe that's why I prefer to think in terms of revolution rather than politics, because to me, revolution is very exciting. That if we can really change the direction of our country, change. Right now, we've got these two parties that sort of have a stranglehold on who can get elected to office, who can get into a debate. And so if we can change that, that's going to make such a huge improvement that to me, it's kind of exciting to think about. And so I would encourage people to think larger than just, oh, this is a presidential election and who's going to be running the country the next few years. Think about really changing everything in the country so that all the injustice that you see doesn't happen anymore and all the corruption you hear about doesn't happen anymore. I mean, if we can achieve those
Yeah.
things, that should be very exciting to people and get them burning to vote and to be informed.
Thank you so much, Russ. I loved every bit of it. I am sad that I have to stop it here, but it is 11 in the night in the Netherlands. It is time to sleep. So I am very grateful for your time. I'm very grateful for all the insightful ideas and conversations you came up with. I would love to talk to you more, but here's where we would like to end it. And I would like to thank you
Yes.
so much for your ideas and your opinion, for being here. And I would like to thank you, the listener, for listening to us and hoping you came out of this podcast knowing a little bit more than you came in with. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.